halfway to the game, and normally that means it's time to buy and sell some stocks. I don't know if that's the right move. Welcome to The Beat. He's Jeremy Birmingham. I'm Austin Ward. How about more of like tail of the tape?
Ooh.
Confidence levels for some of the different positions in the matchups in this game? Because to be honest with you, I don't want to talk about Rutgers when it's 3 days away from a game in the Big House.
Sure. Okay. So how do we do this? We do on position by position? Are we doing Ohio State passing offense versus Michigan passing defense? Ohio State run defense? Like,
Here's what
what's the plan?
You tell me right now, the position matchup that you are most confident favors Ohio State.
The Ohio State receivers versus the Michigan defensive backs. I know Zeke Berry's...
Now, does that come with any kind of...
I mean, obviously there's a caveat. If Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate are not playing, it changes things. But if Bryson Rogers and Mylan Graham are allowed to go out there and play, I think those guys can be successful against the Michigan secondary. I think the Ohio State tight ends Michigan has been gashed this season by the tight end. It's one of their biggest areas because they just blitz all the time. Now, again, how different is that this week? As I said on the live show at Roosters on Monday, I fully suspect that they will drop into a lot of soft zone stuff and force Ohio State to beat them underneath, which again opens up the door for the tight ends. And so I think the Ohio State passing game, provided that there's time for Julian Sayin to throw. I mean, it's funny because we look at Ohio State's offense this year and it feels like it lacks explosion, even when Jeremiah and Carnell out there, but it is clear that they are the number one efficiency rating in passing offense in the country. Like, that is what they do it at a level that no one else in the country can do it. When they decide to drop back and throw, it's always open. So that is an area where Michigan has struggled all year. You saw what even USC did against them, spreading them out. I think Ohio State can take some things from that when USC's receivers, Mekhi Lemon and Jacoby Lane, like those are guys that have the ability to play at a similar level to Ohio State's receivers. So when you add Julian Sayin and then you add the running backs and you add Max Clare, like that is an area where, provided the weather holds up,
there it is.
Provided that the Buckeyes have their two stars, or even one of them, I think that that's an area where the Buckeyes can exploit the Wolverine defense.
I don't mean this to like be dismissive or critical of Carnell Tate, because I think he's the second best wide receiver in the country. If you have one out of the two, and you could flip the order if you want, I am more personally confident as we stand here in the middle of the week in the Woody that Jeremiah Smith is going to play. And I don't. What percentage would you put on Carnell? Everyone wants us to say what we know at this very moment, and it's subject to change.
I mean, again, this is a guy who limped off the field at the end of the Penn State game a month ago, and they're like, no big deal.
Yeah.
He was ready to play until a pre-game warm-up tweak at Purdue a week later. I don't know, 25%. I mean, I don't quote me on it, but it's.
I shouldn't have put you on the spot on that, but we just get asked
what we've heard is that there's a calf injury. And if you have a calf injury, and let's say you're an NBA fan, and I certainly don't recommend that. But if you go back to last year's NBA Finals, right? You had Tyrese Halliburton for the Pacers, a guy that had been nursing a calf strain for weeks. Everyone knew it was tenuous. Game 7 of the NBA Finals, runs out there, pop, Achilles goes. That's what can happen. So that is the concern. The concern is, if you're Carnell Tate, how much better are you come December 21st? Maybe it's worth it for the national championship run. I don't know. It's not pain tolerance for him. It is risk aversion for him.
Yeah.
When Jeremiah Smith's issue, which we think is like a quad bruise.
Risk management. I don't know if it's risk aversion.
Risk management. Fine. That's a better term. If those guys are out there and the weather doesn't get 2021 early.
Yeah.
I think Ohio State should have a big enough lead in the third quarter to be able to even shut them down. I think, and I say that not to be dismissive of Michigan. I'm not talking like a 42-10 lead. I'm saying if you're up 21-10 in the third quarter in this game with this Ohio State defense and the ability they've shown to start running the ball, I think you can stretch the clock out and get out of there with a 21-17 win.
Yeah, so I do. That's why I've tried to keep the conversation about Jeremiah and Carnell separate, because one, I believe, is a pain management, pain tolerance situation, and the other is risk management, risk tolerance. And maybe that will change by the time we get to Saturday. Don't know, but the point was, I feel like if you have one of those guys, Northwestern had 0 of them and was still able, when we watched them 2 weeks ago, get opportunities down the field in man coverage. And if they were just outstretched arms and just threw the arms and drops and plays where they could have taken advantage of Michigan's secondary without anywhere near the quarterback talent or the wide receiver talent
or the tight end talent
that Ohio State has available to them. So I don't know that is the one matchup that I look at as the most winnable for Ohio State, but it's certainly on the short list. And if they do get to full strength, well, that changes everything dramatically, because that favors Ohio State in a way that, it favors them against any opponent in the country, let alone Michigan.
So what is the clear number one advantage?
I think Ohio State's, I want to say secondary, but I don't want to focus primarily on just Caleb Downs. I think the back seven and the way that everything fits together with Arvell Reese, Sonny Styles, Caleb Downs, Jalen McClain, Lorenzo Styles, or a rising Bryce West. We'll see how that looks like with the injury status of Lorenzo, Jermaine Matthews, and Davison Igbinosin. If everything comes down to limitations for Michigan's run game and Bryce Underwood has to make everything happen himself, run the RPO game, try and make quick decisions, I think that Matt Patricia, with all of that available to him in the secondary, which is not even talking about what I think is a advantageous situation for the defensive front for Ohio State and the Rushmen. Maybe we can get to that in a tighter matchup, but I think that there are going to be confusing looks. I think there's going to be blitzes. I think there's going to be Caleb Downs lining up on the line of scrimmage and then jumping into a passing lane to take something away from Bryce Underwood. All this stuff, I think, favors Ohio State's secondary against a true freshman quarterback who has been very prone to mistakes. Now, there were times 3 or 4 years ago, and you would get on me and say I was too dismissive of J.J. McCarthy's ability. Mm-hmm. And I still don't think he's a great quarterback. He made plays that outperformed what I expected from him in the game and helped them win games that I didn't think that he had any business winning. So I'm not trying to speak that into existence, or I'm not trying to diminish what Bryce Underwood is capable of doing. But we have seen, without question, bad decision-making, turnovers, and inaccuracy with the football down the field. Now, he's also made plays that are dazzling. I think he's got all the talent in the world, and maybe this conversation about him in 2 years would be dramatically different. In fact, I expected it probably should be or would be, depending on how Michigan is able to develop him. But as it stands right now, putting Bryce Underwood against, which is basically a matchup against Matt Patricia and a Super Bowl winning NFL defensive coordinator, because he can implement whatever vision he wants with those guys that are on the field, that is as lopsided as you're going to find in a matchup.
I mean, on paper. And I don't know if maybe this is where I feel weird about this week's game as opposed to the last couple of years, because I've been so on edge, and I think I have so much confidence in what Matt Patricia's doing that I almost probably give too much credit. Like, we've had Justin Zwick on the live show at Roosters 2 weeks ago was talking about the seam and how that's been open for teams. And then you think about what Bryce Underwood does in the RPO game and his ability to get rid of the ball quickly. I think that's an area where, like,
I think maybe they were baiting it.
That's what I'm wondering. Like, is Matt Patricia doing that on purpose? I don't know, because Michigan's passing game is really going to be dependent on Bryce Underwood's ability to get the ball to Andrew Marsh quickly. And he's shown that he's a pretty good freshman receiver himself, and then using their tight ends. I think there's a lot of ways Ohio State can attack the Michigan offense. If Jordan Marshall isn't playing, or if he's limited, that changes things even another level. The guy that replaced him did a nice job against Maryland, but that's Maryland. It's not the same thing. And so I think anything that you can do for, I mean, just a random side note, I think perhaps maybe the injury or the potential absence of this weekend that might be more important than Jeremiah Smith or Carnell Tate for Ohio State is Max Bredesen for Michigan, who is dinged up. And Sharon Moore on Tuesday or Monday said it didn't look good, and but if anyone can tough it out, it'll be him if he's not 100%.
Yeah.
He is what makes Michigan's offense go. When you look at them and you watch them play this year, and you have the 8 50-plus yard touchdown runs between Jordan Marshall and Justice Haynes, those are all sprung by Max Bredesen. So if he's not out there, it changes things a lot for Ohio State. And I think in a way that it actually changes what my perception is of the overall alignment that they use, because I'm fully expecting this to be a heavy Peyton Pierce game, 3-linebacker game. But if Max Bredesen isn't out there and you have Michigan using H-back type tight end in his place instead of Bredesen, I think it changes the way Ohio State has to attack this game. So it's interesting.
Yeah, it's fascinating, because that also goes back to what I'm saying. Whatever the configuration is with that back seven, whether that includes Peyton Pierce or whether that's the sort of base nickel look that we've grown accustomed to, Matt Patricia, I think, is equally confident in both. And, he can show different looks, I think, on every given snap to Bryce Underwood that is going to make things very difficult for him. That's what I anticipate. And I feel like we've we've Freaky Friday like a brain swap this week, because you were talking about like, well, maybe they just left the seam open. The throw that Jay-Z was referencing a couple weeks ago against Purdue, Caleb Downs was in the throwing lane, in the window, and when I watched it in real time, I was like, I think Caleb let them catch that on purpose. And I mean, that's a crazy thought to have, but it looked like he went to leap for it, and he's just like, no, Matty P wanted me to let that one go.
I'm not going to rule anything out, okay? The world has gone cuckoo.
Yeah.
But certainly, you look at what Bryce Underwood has done, his body of work, you see the flashes, but it is hard to envision him being consistent enough to do the things you have to do without a reliable run game threat. So, this is a game that is a huge game for Caden McDonald, who has
Outland Trophy finalist.
Toughed his way through the last 4 weeks with a huge spat on his ankle. Yep. Again, Michigan, this is not breaking news here. Breaking news, Michigan will try and get Ohio State off their game. They will do their dirty things. They will talk their trash.
They'll do that.
It is going to be very important that the guys on Ohio State's team, Jermaine Matthews, Phillip Daniels, anybody from Southwest Ohio or New Jersey is under control. Because, and Edric Houston, guys like that. Yeah. It is not, that's where last year, all week leading up to it, I was talking like there's a path. It's hidden yards, it's the run game. It's hidden yards, it's the run game. It's hidden yards, it's the run game. Ryan Day on Tuesday talking about catching the ball on kicks.
Which they didn't do again last week.
Those are things that Michigan special teams has been its worst in years, and including the greatest kicker in the history of college football, who is hitting only 66% of his kicks this year. If this game comes down to special teams, I think it might be a who makes the biggest blunder type of situation. Michigan, Sharon Moore talking about putting number 0 back out there for them this week, who's fumbled, I think, every game he's been in.
Yeah.
So Samaj Morgan, the guy who talked all that trash a couple of years ago.
Yep. Fumble machine.
It's just such an interesting game, because it's only going to take a ball bouncing one way or another once or twice to swing this, I think.
Well, that's the other part
because of the mental side of it for Ohio State.
That's the other part of fielding the punt, which is why it's so dangerous to let it hit. It's not that it can cost you 20 yards of field position, which happened to Brandon Ennis and Ohio State again last week against Rutgers, but that ball can bounce anywhere. Yeah. And suddenly you have a live grenade out there that can cost you not field position and an actual turnover. So I think that's the most even matchup is the special teams part, which I think has got to make it should inspire some confidence, because it means that Ohio State has elevated its play there, and also that Michigan has regressed in that area. But it can also, I think, make you incredibly nervous, because if it is a coin flip, then you have to hope that the head side up lands for you.
And this is turning into a Three Thoughts Wednesday in some ways. Remember, folks, we are going to be using your questions for our normal Three Thoughts Thursday, your questions, your thoughts. So get them into the Austin and Birm Show at gmail.com, the Austin and Birm Show at gmail.com. We both probably allowed ourselves to be too heavily impacted by one spring practice from Julian Sayin that I have no problem admitting tinted my view of the base of the race between him and Lincoln Kienholz heading into the summer. It was the final practice of the spring, day before the spring game. It was 35 degrees. It was rainy. It was windy. And Julian Sayin looked like someone in that moment who had never thrown a ball outside before.
Or handed one off.
Now, obviously, he's played a lot of football since then. He's a lot more in control of everything about his game. How much does that, when you start talking about matchups in this game, and I bring up the weather because we don't know what's going to happen. It seems like it's the closer and closer now to the middle of the game where heavy snow might be expected. How much is that still in your brain? Because I know it's still in mine, and I think it's probably unfair that it is, but it still is.
Yeah, I mean, at that time, and I've tried to stress this repeatedly, of course I'm thinking about it, because it's one of the only times we've seen Julian Sayin in truly adverse weather conditions. Now, he did play in rain a couple weeks ago briefly against UCLA. Didn't seem like it affected him in the accuracy very much, certainly not the confidence. Don't know every single bit of weather he played in California growing up.
Probably not snow.
The 7-on-7 where we saw him in Miami. Pretty nice day down there. It's not to suggest that I am still concerned about it, but it has to be in the back of everyone's mind because it's a rep that he doesn't have a ton of going into Saturday where it's going to get dicey. And, CJ Stroud, I thought he handled it pretty well. Some of his first times. Now, he didn't win those games, certainly not in the big house. But he threw for a billion yards with the flu, is my point. I don't know that it is going to make a huge difference. So I'm trying not to think about it. And the only reason that, as you mentioned, that it sticks in the back of our mind is because we haven't seen him necessarily erase that doubt by getting to go out and play in poor weather conditions. We've seen him do just about everything else through 11 games, and all of that is off the charts. The reason that particular game resonated, or that particular practice back in April, was that it was like the fourth time that Lincoln Kienholz, quote unquote, had outplayed him during spring. And so that was more influential to carry that out into the summer. At the same time that was happening, we also knew and said and recognized all along that the highest ceiling, the best passing ability, the true potential of this team to win a national championship was likely going to come down to Julian Sayin's arm and how quickly he could get up to speed and how quickly he could tap in to that 5-star upside. And he has done that, I think, even ahead of what Ohio State could have reasonably expected. So, yes, it's right here. It's in the back of the mind. But Bryce Underwood has to play in it too. And I would, if it were me, I would feel more confident in Julian Sayin to handle that than Bryce Underwood.
And to be fair to Julian, that was spring practice number 14.
Yeah.
He was still split squads. He did not have the receivers that he now has the rapport and chemistry with. And maybe he doesn't have them this weekend, so maybe that plays into it. But I do think that it's worth at least acknowledging that they were split that day and he was throwing to walk-ons and backups.
Yeah, but he had previous days where the issues were interceptions and maybe decisions that didn't make a lot of sense. The part that stands out the most to me was he had to take multiple laps for fumbling, handoff exchanges. And, if we're going to, that has not been an issue for this team this year. There's one right pitch to C.J. Donaldson that hit the turf, and everything else, the execution, center to quarterback to running back has been sharp all year. So, I won't spend a ton of time thinking about it now moving forward, other than you reminding me.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm going to be nervous about it because I'm a nervous freak.
Yeah, that's true. So, when you are at your most nervous, what is a matchup that you are actually legitimately concerned about?
I mean, it's the recipe that we've been talking about for the last 6 weeks. It's hurry up offensive. Michigan is not really prone to do that, but again, they've been working on things all year long for this game. And if Bryce Underwood can get out there and get into a rhythm early and they can get moving quickly, they have to do it.
Yeah.
If they give Ohio State a chance to do pre-snap stuff on defense, it is going to go poorly for Bryce Underwood. I'm not saying it's not going to go poorly in base defense, because we've certainly seen him do that this year at times. But if you can get going a little bit early and put the pressure on Ohio State, put the pressure on Julian Sayin to have to answer, to have to come back out and match a score for a score in that environment, it's going to be loud. It's going to be nasty up there. That's the thing to me. Like I think if Michigan, I'm not worried about Bryce Underwood in the run game necessarily because of Arvell Reese and Sonny Styles and Caleb Downs and Peyton Pierce. I'm not all that worried about their straight up run game, especially if Max Bredesen isn't playing. I am worried about tempo on offense, and if Bryce Underwood gets going, and this is why the J.J. McCarthy stuff, I think, drove people so nuts, because we watched J.J. McCarthy for 11 games leading into this one 3 straight years.
Yeah.
And then he played like a different person.
Yeah.
Now, J.J. had a lot of personal reasons for that. He sort of...
I think he was also surrounded by a lot more talent. We have to say, like, that's...
He was, but he was also fueled by hatred of Ohio State for a perceived slight as a recruit. And so maybe it's not quite the same for a kid making $13 million up in Ann Arbor like Bryce Underwood. But I do think that if he just puts his best game forward, then that's what scares me. Because Ohio State's not faced a quarterback anywhere near his talent level this season. And when a quarterback's on, like, let's go back to C.J. Stroud against Georgia in that Peach Bowl. Even though Ohio State had 11 players missing in that game, C.J. Stroud single-handedly kept him in it because he was doing alien stuff.
Yeah.
And Bryce Underwood has that potential. So that's really the one thing to me that it gets in my head.
Okay. Yeah. I think it comes down to Ohio State's ability to protect. This is not the same Michigan defensive line from the last 3-4 years, but they still have talented guys on the edge. The tackles have a drop-off, obviously, when you lose to early round NFL draft.
But they've got big bodies in there, and guys that have never missed a snack, according to certain Fox analysts.
I try not to listen to any of that, at least from the play-by-play side. But there's flexibility, there's athleticism, linebackers converting to defensive end, moving around. So, and we know that Wink Martindale's going to show a bunch of different blitzes and try and create pressure on Julian Sayin. So I know that it is not uncommon for me to single that out at right guard, but I don't know that this is one where you're going to try and rotate Tigris Shabola. So he's going to have to be at his best. Austin Saarveld's going to have to maintain the level that he's played at. Luke Montgomery's been banged up. He's not going to be on the availability report, but he's going to have to play his best. Carson Hinsman handling the noise and all the communication and identifying where the pressure is coming to help out Julian Sayin. That's all going to be critical. Practice, Wednesday night is going to be telling on that. If Josh Padilla can potentially help that group, we'll see. But I think you lock in 5 and you try and get that done against that Michigan front and build that confidence. We'll see. We're getting to that point. We're halfway through. We're going to be back in here on Wednesday night for a Woody Wednesday and some snap judgments. So stay tuned all week long. It is the game Saturday in the Big House at noon. This is just a Wednesday on the beat. He's Jeremy Birmingham. I'm Austin Ward. We'll talk to you later.